You're listening to the Bear in Mind podcast, episode number 99.
A podcast uncovering identity, color, and love, where driving yourself crazy is totally sane and curable. Now your host, T. Bias.
Today we're talking about anger and guilt. And you're probably like, oh, this is going to be a fun one. But it's not going to be, I'm going to take a little lighter approach. And so at the end, you're going to have a really good understanding of both emotions that you'll be able to kind of show it off at the end of your understanding your emotional intelligence just by understanding these two emotions. And they're related. And I have touched on their relationship before in the past and prior episodes, and there's no need to go back to any of those episodes. But we often don't see a link between two emotions, and a link can help us understand the emotion and then help us gain the wisdom we want about emotions. We want that kind of emotional intelligence, and we want to therefore maybe teach it to other people, teach it to our children, or apply it in the workplace. And so with anger and guilt, I want you to think about it as a double-edged sword. And this is so funny that I'm recording this episode today. And last night I was watching the movie King Arthur. It was directed by Guy Ritchie. I don't know if I'm saying his name right, but anyway, so it's about King Arthur and the sword, and he can't use the sword. It's absolutely worthless. He can't fight with it because when he goes to touch it, it causes a reaction in his body. So basically, it's like a double-edged sword, which means the sword is therefore useless. And so anger and guilt are kind of that thing. When you have them together, each one of those emotions is not going to help you out together. Or it's not going to help you out in finding out what those emotions are trying to tell you, because at the core, emotions are trying to tell you something. But we can cycle between those two emotions, and that's kind of also the link. A lot of times when we feel angry, we think we shouldn't, or we act upon that anger in a way that we don't value. So maybe we yell at somebody, we write a nasty message to somebody, text somebody something that we didn't mean, and later on we go, oh, I shouldn't have done that. And we regret that. And if you finish that sentence, I shouldn't have done that because, then that's usually guilt speaking. Because it was a wrong thing to do, it was the inappropriate thing to do. And that is the essence of guilt. You think you did something wrong. And regret is just you think you shouldn't have done or I shouldn't have done it. So, and that's usually kind of the easier emotion to understand, like guilt, because we use it, innocent or guilty, that we've done something wrong against our value code, against our script, against our manual for the way we want to live a life. And we feel like we've done something wrong. And the double-edged sword comes in. On the other side of that is anger. Anger is you think you've been wronged. You don't think somebody should have cut in front of you in that really long queue, or somebody cut you off in traffic or something like that, or your kids saying something that you think is disrespectful. That is, you think you've been wronged. Because according to the way we view the world, we think somebody shouldn't be treating us this way. So you can kind of see how it's a double-edged sword there. Guilt is, I've done something wrong, and anger is, I have been wronged by someone or something. So I'm going to take yelling as an example. If that is not something or how we want to show up in our lives, and we yell at our partner, our kids, or whatever, and we later on feel bad. And we go to, oh, I've actually done something wrong, even though at the beginning I thought I was being wronged because somebody said something to me that they shouldn't have. So we tend to enter into guilt in this kind of situation as if it's going to help correct our behavior. We often, because guilt and shame are very similar. Shame is I think I am wrong, and guilt is I did something wrong. So they're very much linked. And we often have been taught, I think, in a lot of messaging in society, and probably by the way we were raised, is that we think that if we feel shame or guilt about what we've done, that'll put us on the right course. And this is where guilt kind of ties off that nicely double-edged sword. It's where it'll get you is that actually feeling guilty and feeling shame doesn't put you on the right course. Now, it doesn't mean that you shouldn't feel it. It's a human emotion, so you're going to feel it. And sometimes it can last really a long time, and it can linger, and it can keep us stuck a little bit for days and weeks. And it seems like it's really working. Yeah, because if you yell at somebody and then you feel guilty about yelling at somebody, what do? You try to kind of be on your best behavior a little bit. You kind of watch it, and you're not yelling, and you're feeling really bad, and you're beating yourself up. And you have a result, right? You're not yelling at them. Maybe for a week, you don't yell at the person you love. And it seems almost like we should. You should be ashamed of yourself for doing that. It's along the same lines as feeling guilty. Here's the newsflash. Guilt and shame won't actually help you change your behaviors, especially around anger. It'll keep you stuck. It'll give you an immediate kind of instant gratification result where you probably are not going to yell or say something you didn't mean when you're feeling guilty or ashamed, but it's not useful in getting you to understand anger. So this is where the two are linked, is that if it's a double-edged sword, how do you actually make it into something useful for you so you can understand your anger? And the way to go about it is to stop the guilt. And I know that's totally easier said than done, because what is happening right now is when you're feeling guilty for something you did out of anger, you are preventing yourself from gaining that wisdom about anger. Because anger will teach you about the self. I'm sure you've heard that anger is about the self, right? Somebody has wronged you. And some of that wisdom from anger about how you want to move forward in your life can't be obtained if we're sitting in guilt, if we're beating ourselves up. Because as long as you're staying in guilt, it's going to continue to be a cycle. You're going to continue to have a double-edged sword instead of an actual sword, which would be useful if you were in combat, but making it something that is a useful tool to you. So whenever you're in this kind of anger guilt cycle, remember that it's like the same side of a coin. It's a double-edged sword. It's that anger comes from I've been wronged, and guilt is I've done something wrong. And the way to stop that cycle is to eliminate the guilt. And it's to stop beating up yourself. And then from there, you can then better understand where your anger is coming from. And once you can understand where your anger is coming from, that understanding will help you reduce the yelling, will help you stop saying the things that you don't want to say. Whatever action is that you're taking from anger, you will be able to gain that wisdom when you get rid of the guilt. So how do you get rid of the guilt? Because it's not so easy, right? When you yell, especially when you yell at your loved one, you're like, I feel really bad about that. And we so badly want to correct it, and we're thinking we're wrong. And one of the things you can do is, in this podcast, I said, you can access wisdom. You can simply think, guilt is preventing me from accessing the wisdom. And if you're still kind of deeper into guilt and it's kind of hitting into shame, like I'm a bad person because I did this, how about you feel guilty and it's okay? You're ashamed and it's okay. Because a lot of times what keeps the guilt and shame going is we are kind of resisting it because it doesn't feel good, right? If you allow yourself to feel shame go through your body. I know that when I feel shame, it lingers for a couple of days and I can feel it in my body and I almost feel nauseous. And then when I allow it to move through my body, it comes up and it almost feels like I can't breathe. So try processing it and allowing for it. A lot of times allowing for it means I'm feeling guilty and that's okay. I'm feeling ashamed of myself and that's okay. Because a lot of times that feeling of guilt and shame is not moving through us. We're not moving through it at the speed at which we would like to. It's kind of staying with us for maybe a week or something and preventing us from moving forward by accessing that wisdom from anger is that we're resisting it. We're avoiding it. We're maybe, binge watching television or overeating or, over social media and things like that. We want to avoid that because it doesn't feel good. And the way to actually get rid of it is to allow it, which seems so counterintuitive, but you can simply start with, I'm feeling guilty and it's okay. I'm ashamed of myself and it's okay. And start there, and you can really start to feel like it's loosening up. I'm feeling this emotion, and it's completely human. That's another thing you can say. This is human. This is part of the human experience to feel guilt or shame. I'm going to wrap it up here, and I'm going to tell you, in the anger and guilt double-edged sword, start with the guilt, and that'll help you reduce your anger, which seems counterintuitive, but start with the guilt. I'll check back with you next week.
Thanks for listening. Listen for a new episode next Tuesday by subscribing on your favorite podcast platform. Bye for now.